The morning sun cast long shadows across the frost-covered yard when Clara Wrenford first heard the hoofbeats. She was hanging Thomas's old shirt on the line, the one with the torn sleeve she'd mended a dozen times, the one that still smelled faintly of his tobacco and leather. For a moment, she pressed the worn fabric to her cheek, remembering how he'd laughed when she'd scolded him for wearing it to town meetings. "A man's got to look respectable, Clara," he'd said, pulling her close. "Especially when he's got the prettiest wife in Nebraska." The memory shattered as three riders crested the hill, their horses' breath steaming in the cold air. Clara's hand stilled on the clothesline as she recognized the lead rider, Agatha Greaves, her sister-in-law dressed in funeral black, despite Thomas having been dead for 3 months now. "Mama." Letty's voice came from the porch where she was helping 5-year-old Millie with her letters. At 11, Letty had learned to read the danger in approaching strangers. "Go inside, girls," Clara said quietly. "Take Millie to the back room." But it was too late. Agatha had already dismounted, her boots crunching on the frozen ground as she approached. The 2 men with her hired hands, Clara didn't recognize, flanked her like hunting dogs. "Good morning, Clara," Agatha said, her voice honey-sweet but cold as winter wind. "I trust you're well enough." Clara kept her voice steady, though her heart was hammering. "What brings you out so early?" "Concern for my brother's children, of course." Agatha's pale eyes flicked to the porch where Letty and Millie huddled together. "I've been hearing troubling reports about their situation." "What kind of reports?" "The kind that suggest they're not being properly cared for." Agatha stepped closer, and Clara caught the scent of lavender water and something else, something sharp and medicinal. "Mrs. Henderson mentioned seeing you in town last week, Clara. She said you looked desperate, unkempt." Clara's jaw tightened. "I was buying supplies." "With what money?" Agatha's smile was razor thin. "Thomas left debts, didn't he? The farm's mortgaged to the hilt. You're penniless, Clara, and everyone knows it." "We're managing." "Are you?" Agatha's gaze moved to the patched clothes on the line, the thin wisps of smoke from the chimney that suggested too little fuel. "I think the truth is that you're barely surviving. And that's no environment for Greaves' children." Clara felt the familiar knot of shame in her stomach. It was true Thomas had left debts and the farm was struggling. But she'd die before she let Agatha know how desperate things had become. "They're my children," she said firmly. "They're my blood." Agatha's voice hardened. "And I won't stand by and watch them suffer because their mother is too proud to admit she can't provide for them. I provide for them just fine." "Do you?" Agatha nodded to one of her men. "Show her." The man stepped forward, producing a folded paper from his coat. Clara's blood ran cold as she recognized the legal seal. "A petition for custody," Agatha said sweetly. "Filed with the county court. Judge Morrison will hear it next week." Clara's hands trembled as she read the document. The accusations were damning neglect, moral unfitness, inability to provide proper care. Names of witnesses who would testify against her, including several prominent townspeople. "This is lies," she whispered. "Is it?" Agatha's voice was patient, reasonable. "Mrs. Patterson saw you begging for credit at the general store. Reverend Walsh mentioned your irregular church attendance. And then there's the matter of your recent visitor." Clara's heart stopped. "What visitor?" "The gentleman who called last week. Dr. Harrison wasn't very concerned about your state of mind. He mentioned you'd been acting strangely, talking about Thomas as if he were still alive." "That's not I never. Grief can be a terrible thing, Clara. It can make a woman unstable, unfit to care for young children." Agatha's smile never wavered. "I'm offering you a chance to do what's right. Come with me now, and we'll discuss arrangements for the girls' care." Fight me, and I'll have no choice but to present the full extent of your difficulties to the court. Clara looked at her daughters still huddled on the porch. Letty's dark eyes were wide with understanding beyond her years. Millie clutched her ragdoll thumb in her mouth despite Clara's attempts to break the habit. "I need time to think," Clara said. "Of course, but not too much time." Agatha remounted her horse with practiced ease. "The hearing is Monday. I trust you'll make the right decision before then." As the riders disappeared over the hill, Clara sank to her knees in the frozen dirt. The petition crumpled in her fist as the weight of her situation crashed over her. Agatha had money influence connections. She could buy whatever testimony she needed. But as Clara looked up at her daughters' faces, she felt something harder than fear settle in her chest. Determination. These were her children, her flesh and blood. She'd carried them, birthed them, loved them through every fever and nightmare. And she'd be damned if she'd let Agatha Greaves take them without a fight. The general store in Coldwater was nearly empty when Clara arrived the next morning, Letty and Millie in tow. She'd spent the night planning, and her first stop was to speak with anyone who might help her understand what she was facing. Samuel Patterson looked up from his ledger as she entered, his expression uncomfortable. "Morning, Mrs. Wrenford." "Mr. Patterson?" Clara kept her voice steady. "I understand you've been asked to testify at my custody hearing." The man's face flushed red. "Now, Clara, you know I got nothing personal against you. What did she offer you?" Clara interrupted. "Money, help with your debts, or just the promise of her continued business?" "It ain't like that." But his eyes wouldn't meet hers. "The truth is, you have been struggling. Everyone can see it. Maybe it would be better for the girls if what? If they lived with a woman who never showed them a moment's kindness while their father was alive." Clara's voice was sharp. "Did you know Agatha visited exactly twice in the 5 years Thomas and I were married? Twice, Mr. Patterson. And both times she made it clear she thought he'd married beneath him." Patterson shifted uncomfortably. "That's between you and her. I just know what I seen. What you seen was a widow trying to keep her family together. What you seen was a woman too proud to beg for charity, but not too proud to ask for fair credit." Clara leaned forward. "I paid my debts, Mr. Patterson. Every penny I owed, I paid. Can you say the same about everyone who shops here?" Before he could answer, the door chimed behind them. Clara turned to see Dr. Harrison entering, his medical bag in hand. The elderly physician paused. When he saw her, his expression troubled. "Mrs. Wrenford, I was hoping to speak with you." Clara's stomach tightened. "About what?" "About the conversation I had with Mrs. Greaves yesterday. She seemed to think I'd expressed concerns about your mental state." "And did you?" Dr. Harrison's weathered face darkened. "I most certainly did not. I told her our conversation was confidential and that I saw no evidence of any mental disturbance. Grief, yes. But grief is not madness." Clara felt a flicker of hope. "Would you be willing to testify to that?" "I would. But Clara..." He hesitated. "I have to ask. Are you sure you want to fight this? Agatha Greaves has deep pockets and a long reach. She could make things very difficult for you." "More difficult than losing my children." "No, I suppose not." Dr. Harrison's expression softened. "Then you'll have my support. What Mrs. Greaves is attempting is unconscionable." As they left the store, Clara felt the weight of curious eyes following them. Word of the custody battle had spread quickly, and she could see the divide it was creating in the community. Some faces showed sympathy, others judgment. A few showed the calculating look of people deciding which side would benefit them most. "Mama," Letty said quietly as they walked home, "are we going to have to live with Aunt Agatha?" Clara stopped walking and knelt down to her daughter's level. "I don't know, sweetheart. But I promise you this, I will fight for you and Millie with everything I have. Whatever happens, remember that you are loved, you are wanted, and you are mine." Letty's small hand found hers. "I remember what Papa used to say about Mr. Dunn." Clara's heart skipped. What about him? That if anything ever happened, we should go to him. He lives out west somewhere, in the mountains. Clara stared at her daughter. She'd forgotten about Ezekiel Dunn, Thomas's old army friend. Thomas had mentioned him occasionally, always with respect and affection. Said he'd gone west after the war, started a ranch in Colorado Territory. If ruin ever comes. Thomas had said once, "Head west and find Zeke. He's a good man and he pays his debts." But that was before she'd thought ruin would actually come. Before she'd imagined needing to run. "Do you remember where Papa said he lived?" Letty nodded solemnly. "Near Pike's Peak, in a valley with a river running through it. He has horses and cattle, and he owes Papa his life." Clara felt something shift in her chest. Maybe she didn't have to fight this battle alone. Maybe there was another option. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table with her meager savings spread before her. $23 and some change. Enough for train tickets to Denver, maybe enough for supplies for the journey beyond that. She looked around the little cabin that had been her home for 5 years. The table where Thomas had taught Letty to read. The chair where she'd rocked Millie to sleep as a baby. The bed where she'd nursed Thomas through his final illness. Could she leave it all behind? Could she take her children and flee into the wilderness on nothing more than a half-remembered story and a desperate hope? The sound of horses approaching made her decision for her. Clara peered through the window and saw Agatha's men circling the house, their intentions clear. They weren't here to talk. "Letty," she called softly, "get Millie. Pack only what you can carry. We're leaving." Now. Clara grabbed her few valuables, her mother's locket, Thomas's watch, the deed to the farm, and stuffed them into a cloth bag. She could hear the men talking outside, their voices low but menacing. "Mrs. Wrenford," one of them called. "We know you're in there. Mrs. Greaves wants to talk to you." Clara helped her daughters out the back window, then followed them into the cold night. They crept through the darkness toward the barn where their old horse waited. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. As they rode away from the only home her daughters had ever known, Clara felt tears freezing on her cheeks. But she also felt something else, a fierce determination that surprised her with its strength. Agatha Greaves had made a mistake. She'd pushed too hard too fast, and now Clara had nothing left to lose, which made her more dangerous than Agatha could possibly imagine. The train to Denver was crowded with travelers heading west, miners, hoping to strike it, rich farmers seeking new land, families chasing dreams of prosperity. Clara sat with her daughters in the cheapest seats, their few possessions clutched tightly in their laps. "Where are we going, Mama?" Millie asked for the 100th time. "To find an old friend of your Papa's," Clara replied. "Someone who might help us." "What if he doesn't want to help?" Clara looked at her youngest daughter, so small, so trusting. "Then we'll figure something else out." The journey took 2 days. And by the time they reached Denver, Clara's small savings were nearly gone. The city was a sprawling mix of grand buildings and ramshackle shanties, all built in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains. Clara asked around about Ezekiel Dunn and finally found an old prospector who knew him. "Sure, I know Zeke. Got a spread about 30 miles south in a valley near the Arkansas River. Good man, keeps to himself mostly. Lost his family in a fire some years back." The man's directions were vague, but Clara bought supplies with her remaining money and hired a wagon to take them as far as the main road. From there, they would have to walk. The Colorado Territory was more beautiful than Clara had imagined. The mountains rose like cathedral spires against the sky, and the air was thin and clean. But it was also harsh and unforgiving, especially for a woman traveling alone with 2 young children. They walked for most of a day, following a rutted road that wound through pine forests and across rushing streams. Clara's feet were blistered and bleeding, but she kept moving. Behind them, somewhere in the distance, she could hear the sound of horses. Whether they were travelers or pursuers, she couldn't tell. As the sun began to set, they crested a hill and saw it a green valley spread out below them with a river running through its center. Smoke rose from a chimney in the distance, and Clara could see cattle grazing in the meadows. "There," she whispered. "That has to be it." The ranch house was built of logs and stone solid and weathered. A man emerged from the barn as they approached, and Clara's heart sank. He was tall and lean with graying hair and hard eyes. He looked like someone who'd been disappointed by life too many times. "Can I help you?" His voice was wary. "Are you Ezekiel Dunn?" "I am." "My name is Clara Wrenford. I was married to Thomas Wrenford." He said. She faltered, suddenly uncertain. "He said if I ever needed help, I should come to you." The man's expression changed, softening slightly. "Thomas Wrenford. I heard he died." "Yes, 6 months ago." Zeke's eyes moved to Letty and Millie, taking in their travel-stained clothes and exhausted faces. "You walked here from Denver." "We took a wagon part of the way." "Why?" Clara took a deep breath. "Because my sister-in-law is trying to take my children away from me. Because I had nowhere else to go." Zeke was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Then he stepped aside and gestured toward the house. "Come on in. You look ready to drop." The interior was simple but comfortable, with a stone fireplace and sturdy furniture. Clara sank into a chair, pulling her daughters close. She was so tired she could barely think straight. "You hungry?" Zeke asked. Before Clara could answer, her stomach growled audibly. She felt her face burn with embarrassment, but Zeke just nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. He returned with bread, cheese, and cold meat. Clara and the girls ate in silence, while Zeke watched from across the room. "Tell me about Thomas," he said finally. Clara swallowed hard. "He was a good man, a good husband and father. He died of fever, and his sister blamed me for his death. Said I was unfit to raise his children." "Were you—" The question stung, but Clara met his gaze steadily. "No, I was not." "Then why didn't you fight her?" "I tried, but she has money and influence. She was going to win." Zeke nodded slowly. "So you ran." "I protected my children. There's a difference." "Is there?" Zeke's voice was mild, but Clara heard the challenge in it. "Yes, because running means giving up. I'm not giving up. I'm regrouping." Something flickered in Zeke's eyes, approval maybe, or recognition. "Thomas saved my life at Bull Run." "Did he ever tell you that?" Clara shook her head. "Confederate sniper had me pinned down. Thomas crawled through enemy fire to reach me, took a bullet in the shoulder doing it. When I thanked him, he said there was no debt between friends." Zeke was quiet for a moment. "But I always felt there was. A debt I could never repay." "You don't owe us anything," Clara said quietly. "Maybe not, but I owe him, and that's enough." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening valley. "There's a room upstairs. Small, but it's got a bed and a stove. You and the girls can stay there tonight." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Tomorrow we need to figure out what comes next." As Clara tucked her daughters into the narrow bed, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. It was fragile, tentative, but it was there. "I like him," Millie whispered sleepily. Me too," Letty agreed. "He has kind eyes." Clara looked out the window at the star-filled sky. Somewhere out there, Agatha was probably searching for them. But for tonight, they were safe, and sometimes safe was enough. Clara woke to the sound of someone chopping wood. She dressed quickly and crept downstairs, not wanting to wake the girls. Through the kitchen window, she could see Zeke working in the yard, his movements efficient and sure. She found coffee beans in a tin and started a pot brewing, then began exploring the pantry. By the time Zeke came inside, the smell of bacon and eggs filled the air. "You didn't need to do that," he said. I wanted to. It's the least I can do. They ate in comfortable silence, the girls still sleeping upstairs. Clara studied Zeke's face in the morning light, noting the lines around his eyes, the careful way he held himself. "Tell me about your family," she said. Zeke's expression shuddered. "What about them?" The prospector in Denver mentioned a fire. 3 years ago. My wife and son were trapped in the house when it started. I was out checking the cattle." His voice was flat, emotionless. "By the time I got back, it was too late. I'm sorry. It was my fault. I should have been there." Clara reached across the table and touched his hand. "You couldn't have known, couldn't I?" The chimney had been smoking for weeks. I kept meaning to fix it, but there was always something else that seemed more important. Zeke's voice was bitter. "My wife died because I was too busy with my precious cattle to fix a damn chimney. Your wife died because accidents happen, not because you failed her." Zeke looked at her, then really looked at her. "You sound like you know something about failure. I know something about guilt, about blaming yourself for things you couldn't control." "Like what?" Clara was quiet for a moment. "Like letting Thomas work himself to death, trying to keep the farm afloat. Like not seeing how sick he was until it was too late. Like not having the strength to fight Agatha when she came for my children. But you did fight her. You're here. I ran away. That's not the same thing. Sometimes running away is the bravest thing you can do." Clara looked at this man who'd opened his home to strangers, who carried his own burden of guilt and loss. "Is that what you're doing, running away every day? From what? From the world. From people who expect things from me. From the possibility of caring about someone and losing them again." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "I understand that. After Thomas died, I thought I'd never care about anything again. But then Agatha threatened my children, and I discovered I had more fight left in me than I thought. And now I'm tired of running. I want to stand and fight." Zeke studied her face. "Even if you lose, especially if I lose, because at least I'll know I tried." Over the next few days, they fell into a routine. Clara helped with the household chores while Zeke worked the ranch. The girls explored their new surroundings with the resilience of youth, delighting in the horses and the wide open spaces. But Clara knew it couldn't last. Sooner or later, Agatha would find them. And when she did, Clara would have to make a choice, keep running or turn and fight. The decision was made for her on a sunny Thursday morning when she saw riders approaching the ranch. Her heart sank as she recognized the lead figure, Agatha Greaves, dressed in her customary black, flanked by 2 federal marshals. "Zeke," Clara called softly. "We have company." He emerged from the barn, his hand resting on his gun. "Stay behind me," he said quietly, but Clara stepped forward instead. "No, this is my fight." Agatha dismounted with practiced ease, her pale eyes taking in every detail of the ranch. "Clara, you've led us quite a chase. I haven't led you anywhere. I've been trying to get away from you. And now that's over." Agatha produced a document from her coat. "A federal warrant for your arrest. Kidnapping Clara. You kidnapped my brother's children." Clara's blood ran cold. "They're my children. Not according to the court. The custody hearing was held as scheduled. You forfeited your rights when you failed to appear." "That's not legal," Zeke said. "She had a right to defend herself. She had a right to appear in court. She chose not to." Agatha's smile was triumphant. "The marshal has orders to arrest her and return the children to Nebraska." One of the marshals stepped forward. "Mrs. Wrenford, you're under arrest for kidnapping and contempt of court. You have the right to—" "Wait," Clara interrupted. "I want to see that warrant." The marshal hesitated, then handed over the document. Clara read it carefully, her heart sinking with each line. It was legitimate, properly signed and sealed. "However," she said, looking up, "this warrant is for Clara Wrenford. I'm Clara Dunn." The marshals exchanged glances. "Ma'am, I remarried 3 days ago. To Mr. Dunn here." Clara reached into her pocket and produced a marriage certificate. "As a married woman, I have different legal rights than I did as a widow." Agatha's face went white. "That's impossible. You can't have—" "I can, and I did." Clara's voice was steady. "And as Mr. Dunn's wife, I'm entitled to legal representation and a proper hearing in the territory where I reside." The marshal examined the certificate carefully. "This appears to be in order, but it doesn't change the fact that you're accused of kidnapping." "It changes everything," Zeke said quietly. "Because now she's not just a desperate widow. She's a Colorado citizen with rights under territorial law. And," Clara added, "she's a woman who's prepared to fight for her children in a court of law, not in the shadows of small-town politics." Agatha's composure cracked. "You can't win this, Clara. I have witnesses' evidence connections, and I have the truth." Clara's voice was firm. "And sometimes that's enough." The marshals conferred quietly, then one of them approached. "Mrs. Dunn, you're still under arrest. But given the change in circumstances, we'll arrange for a hearing in the territorial court in Colorado Springs." "When?" "2 weeks from today." Clara nodded. "I'll be there." As the marshals led her away, Clara caught Zeke's eye. "Take care of the girls," she said. "And remember, sometimes the only way out is through." The Colorado Springs jail was a far cry from the comfortable ranch house Clara had briefly called home. The cell was small and damp, with a narrow cot and a bucket for necessities. But Clara barely noticed her surroundings. She was too busy planning. The jailer, a grizzled man named Murphy, seemed sympathetic to her situation. "Got daughters of my own," he said when he brought her meal. "Can't imagine what you're going through." "I need to send a telegram," Clara said. "To someone in Denver. Can you help me?" Murphy hesitated. "Depends on what it says." Clara gave him the message, a simple request for legal assistance sent to the Territorial Attorney General's office. She'd heard that the new Attorney General, James Morrison, was a fair man who didn't tolerate corruption. "I'll see what I can do," Murphy said. 2 days later, Clara had a visitor. A young woman with intelligent eyes and a determined expression introduced herself as Ruth Hartley. "I'm an attorney," she said. "James Morrison sent me. He's concerned about the irregularities in your case." Clara felt a surge of hope. "What kind of irregularities?" "The kind that suggest someone with money and influence has been manipulating the legal system. Your original custody hearing was held without proper notice. The kidnapping charges were filed without evidence that you actually left the state unlawfully. And the federal warrant was issued based on false information. Can you prove that?" "I'm working on it. But I need your help. I need to understand exactly what happened from the beginning." Clara told her story from the start. Thomas's death, Agatha's threats, the staged accusations, and the desperate flight west. Ruth listened carefully, taking notes and asking pointed questions. "The marriage certificate," Ruth said finally. "Is it genuine?" Clara felt her cheeks burn. "No. Zeke and we're not actually married. We created it to buy time." "That's forgery. You could face additional charges." "I know. But I was desperate. I needed something to stop them from taking my children immediately." Ruth was quiet for a moment. "Actually, it might not matter. Colorado Territory has common law marriage provisions. If you and Mr. Dunn have been living together as husband and wife, even for a short time, it could be considered legally binding. But we haven't been living together that way. We're friends, nothing more. The law doesn't require romantic attachment. It requires mutual consent and cohabitation. You've been living in his house, helping with household duties, presenting yourselves as a married couple. That might be enough." Clara felt a flicker of hope. "And if it is, then you have standing to challenge the custody order. And I have grounds to demand a full investigation into Mrs. Greaves's conduct." Over the next week, Ruth worked tirelessly to build Clara's case. She interviewed witnesses, examined documents, and uncovered a pattern of corruption that reached from Nebraska to Colorado. Agatha Greaves has been paying people to lie, Ruth told Clara during one of their meetings. The doctor who testified about your mental state was bribed. The shopkeeper who claimed you were destitute was threatened with foreclosure. Even the judge who granted the custody order has financial ties to the Greaves family. Can you prove it? I'm working on it. But Clara, you need to understand, even if I can prove fraud, it doesn't guarantee you'll get your children back. The legal system is stacked against women, especially widows. Then what do you suggest? Ruth leaned forward. Fight. Fight with everything you have. Make them prove every accusation. Force them to defend every lie, and hope that justice still means something in this territory. The day of the hearing arrived gray and cold. Clara was escorted to the courthouse in shackles, but she held her head high. She'd spent 2 weeks preparing for this moment, and she was ready. The courtroom was packed with spectators, including several reporters from Denver newspapers. Word of the case had spread, and it was being watched as a test of women's rights in the territories. Judge Harrison was a stern-looking man with silver hair and piercing blue eyes. He examined the documents carefully before calling the court to order. This is a custody hearing, he announced. The petitioner, Mrs. Agatha Greaves, seeks custody of her nieces on grounds of parental unfitness. The respondent, Mrs. Clara Dunn, contests the petition. Agatha's attorney, a polished man from Denver, presented his case first. He painted Clara as an unfit mother who'd abandoned her children and fled the state rather than face justice. The evidence is clear, he declared. Mrs. Dunn is mentally unstable, financially destitute, and morally corrupt. She has repeatedly placed these innocent children in danger through her reckless actions. But when he called his witnesses, Ruth was ready. She cross-examined each one, ruthlessly exposing inconsistencies and contradictions in their testimony. Dr. Patterson, she said to the shopkeeper, you testified that Mrs. Dunn was destitute and couldn't pay her debts. But according to your own records, she paid her account in full before leaving Nebraska. How do you explain that? The man squirmed uncomfortably. Well, that is, Mrs. Henderson, you claim to witness Mrs. Dunn acting strangely in town. But you also testified that you rarely saw her. Which is it? One by one, Ruth demolished the prosecution's case. But the real bombshell came when she called her own witness, a woman Clara had never seen before. State your name for the record, Ruth said. Sarah Mitchell. I was Mrs. Greaves's housekeeper until 2 weeks ago. Agatha's face went white. She whispered frantically to her attorney, who looked equally shocked. Miss Mitchell. Ruth continued, did you witness the events that led to Mrs. Dunn's departure from Nebraska? I did. Mrs. Greaves ordered me to spread lies about Mrs. Dunn around town. Said she was going to ruin her reputation so badly that no one would believe her in court. What kind of lies? That she was seeing other men, that she was drinking, that she was neglecting her children. None of it was true. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Judge Harrison banged his gavel for order. Why are you testifying now? Ruth asked. Because I couldn't live with myself anymore. Mrs. Dunn never did anything wrong. She was just trying to take care of her children after her husband died. What Mrs. Greaves did to her was evil, plain and simple. Agatha's attorney jumped up. Objection. This witness is clearly biased. Overruled, Judge Harrison said firmly. I'll allow it. Sarah's testimony was devastating. She described in detail how Agatha had orchestrated the campaign against Clara, bribing witnesses and manipulating evidence. By the time she finished, Agatha was slumped in her chair, her face gray with defeat. But Ruth wasn't finished. She called Zeke to the stand, and he testified about Clara's character and her devotion to her children. Then she called the girls themselves. Letty walked to the witness stand with quiet dignity, her dark eyes serious. When Ruth asked her about her life with her mother, she spoke clearly and honestly. Mama never neglected us. She always made sure we had food, even when she didn't eat. She taught us to read and write, and she told us stories about Papa. She loves us more than anything. Do you want to live with your aunt? No, Letty said firmly. Aunt Agatha is mean. She never loved us. She just wants to hurt Mama. When Millie took the stand, she was so small, her feet barely touched the floor. But her voice was clear when she spoke. I want to stay with Mama. She takes care of me when I'm sick, and she sings me songs when I'm scared. Aunt Agatha never sang to me. She never hugged me. She's not nice like Mama. By the time the testimony concluded, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Judge Harrison called for a recess to consider his decision. Clara waited in the holding cell, her heart pounding. She'd done everything she could. The rest was up to the judge. When court reconvened, Judge Harrison's expression was grim. I've heard enough testimony to make my decision. Mrs. Greaves, your petition for custody is denied. Furthermore, I'm ordering an investigation into your conduct. Perjury is a serious crime, and the evidence suggests you've committed it repeatedly. Clara felt her knees go weak with relief. She'd won. Her children were safe. But Agatha wasn't finished. She stood up, her face twisted with rage. You can't do this. Those children belong with me. I'm their blood. You're a woman who tried to destroy an innocent widow and her children. Judge Harrison replied coldly. You have no claim on them. I'll appeal this decision. That's your right. But until such time, Mrs. Dunn retains full custody of her children, and you're ordered to have no contact with them. As the crowd dispersed, Clara found herself surrounded by well-wishers. Ruth hugged her warmly, and even some of the reporters approached to offer congratulations. But the person she most wanted to see was Zeke. She found him waiting outside the courthouse, Letty and Millie beside him. It's over, she said, hardly believing it herself. Yes, it is. I can't believe we won. You fought for your children. That's what mothers do. Clara looked at the man who'd risked everything to help her, who'd given her sanctuary when she had nowhere else to go. Zeke, about the marriage certificate. We should probably make it legal, he said quietly. If you want to. Clara's heart skipped. Are you proposing to me? I'm proposing a partnership. Two people who've been broken by life, helping each other heal. Two people who care about those girls more than anything else. And if it becomes more than that, then we'll figure it out as we go. Clara looked at her daughters, who were watching with bright, hopeful eyes. Then she looked at Zeke, this quiet man who'd become their unlikely savior. Yes, she said simply. I think I'd like that very much. 6 months later, Clara stood in the kitchen of what was now truly their home, preparing breakfast for her family. The morning light streamed through windows she'd hung with curtains sewn from fabric bought with money earned from her sewing work in town. The scent of bacon and coffee filled the air, and she could hear Zeke talking to the girls outside as they tended the horses. They'd been legally married a month after the trial, in a simple ceremony at the ranch with Ruth Hartley as witness. The marriage had started as a practical arrangement, but it had grown into something deeper, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Mama. Millie burst through the door, her cheeks flushed with excitement. The new schoolteacher is here. Clara smiled. They'd convinced the territorial government to fund a school for the valley's children, and Ruth had recommended a young woman named Elizabeth Porter for the position. It was part of the plan they'd developed to build a community where children could thrive, where women could find support, where justice wasn't just a word. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Is she settling in well? She's real nice. And she says she's going to teach us about the Constitution and women's rights and everything. Letty followed her sister inside, more composed, but equally excited. At 12, she was growing into a thoughtful young woman with strong opinions about justice and fairness. Miss Porter says there's going to be a vote soon about whether Colorado should become a state. Letty said. And if it does, women might get the right to vote. That would be something, wouldn't it? Clara said, ruffling her daughter's hair. Maybe by the time you're grown, you'll be able to vote for the leaders you want. I hope so, because there are a lot of things that need changing. Clara couldn't argue with that. The trial had opened her eyes to the corruption and inequality that plagued the legal system. She'd begun corresponding with other women who'd faced similar challenges, and together they were working to push for reforms. There's a letter for you, Letty said, holding out an envelope. From Nebraska. Clara's heart skipped, but she kept her expression calm. Thank you, sweetheart. She waited until the girls were outside before opening the letter. It was from Dr. Harrison, the physician who testified on her behalf. Dear Clara, I thought you should know that Agatha Greaves has been indicted on federal charges of perjury and mail fraud. It seems the investigation uncovered evidence that she'd been forging documents and bribing witnesses for years, not just in your case, but in several others. She's been sentenced to 2 years in federal prison. More importantly, the judge has ordered her to pay damages to you and your daughters for the harm she caused. It's not a fortune, but it should help secure their futures. I hope you and the girls are happy and safe. You deserve all the good things life can offer. Your friend, Dr. James Harrison. Clara folded the letter carefully. Justice, indeed. She'd never expected Agatha to face real consequences for her actions, but the law had finally caught up with her. Good news, Zeke asked, coming up behind her. Very good news. Agatha has been sentenced to prison, and she's been ordered to pay damages. Zeke nodded with satisfaction. About time. It doesn't matter anymore, Clara said. None of that matters anymore. And it was true. The past was the past. What mattered was the future they were building together. The ranch that was thriving the children, who were growing strong and confident. The love that had grown between her and Zeke, like a flower blooming in unexpected soil. That evening, they gathered on the porch to watch the sunset, paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. The girls were playing with the new kittens that had been born in the barn, their laughter carrying across the valley. I have something to tell you, Clara said quietly to Zeke. About the damages from Agatha. What about them? I want to use the money to establish a fund, to help other women who are facing what I faced. Women who need legal help or a place to stay, or just someone to believe in them. Zeke smiled. That sounds like exactly what you should do. And I want to expand the school. Add more teachers, more subjects. Make it a place where children can learn about justice and fairness and standing up for what's right. Also a good plan. Clara was quiet for a moment, watching her daughters play. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't fought back, if I'd just accepted what Agatha was trying to do? I try not to think about it, Zeke said. But I know one thing: the world would be a poorer place without you and the girls in it. And without you. I never thanked you properly for what you did, for risking everything to help us. You don't need to thank me. Helping you and the girls, it gave me a purpose again. It made me feel alive. Clara reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. I love you, Zeke. I know I don't say it often enough, but I do. Not just because you saved us, but because of who you are. Because you saw something worth fighting for when I couldn't see it myself. I love you too. He said, his voice rough with emotion. More than I ever thought possible. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Clara felt a peace she'd never thought possible. She thought about the journey that had brought them here, the pain, the fear, the moments of despair, when she'd wondered if she'd ever find happiness again. But she'd found more than happiness. She'd found purpose, family, love. She'd found herself. The next morning brought news that would change everything one more time. A rider approached the ranch with a telegram from Ruth Hartley, who was now working in the territorial capital. What does it say? Zeke asked. Clara read the message twice before responding. Colorado is going to become a state, and the new state constitution is going to include women's suffrage. We're going to have the right to vote. That's wonderful news. There's more. Ruth says they're looking for women to serve on the state's first board of education. She's recommended me for the position. Zeke's face lit up. Clara, that's incredible. You'd be perfect for it. But it would mean traveling to Denver regularly. Being away from the ranch from you and the girls. The girls and I can take care of ourselves for a few days at a time. And this is important work. Work that could help other children, other families. Clara looked at her husband, this quiet, steady man who'd become her partner in every sense of the word. Are you sure? I'm sure. You have a gift for fighting injustice, Clara. The territory needs people like you in positions of power. Then I'll do it. I'll accept the position. Over the following months, Clara threw herself into her new role. She helped design curricula that emphasized critical thinking and civic responsibility. She advocated for funding for rural schools and training for teachers. She worked to ensure that all children, regardless of their background, had access to quality education. It was demanding work, but it was also deeply satisfying. Clara felt like she was making a real difference, helping to build a better future for the next generation. The girls were thriving too. Letty had become a natural leader, organizing the other children in games and activities. She'd also started a small newspaper for the Valley, writing articles about local events and issues. Millie had developed a passion for horses and was becoming an accomplished rider under Zeke's patient instruction. One evening, as Clara was preparing for another trip to Denver, Letty approached her with a serious expression. Mama, I've been thinking about what I want to do when I grow up. Oh, and what's that? I want to be a lawyer, like Miss Hartley. I want to help people who can't help themselves. Clara felt her heart swell with pride. That's a wonderful ambition, sweetheart. But there aren't many women lawyers, are there? No. But there are more than there used to be. And by the time you're old enough, there will be even more. Will you help me? Will you teach me about the law and about fighting for what's right? Clara pulled her daughter close. I'll teach you everything I know. But the most important thing I can teach you is this: never let anyone tell you that you can't do something just because you're a woman. Never let anyone make you feel less than worthy of respect and dignity. I won't, Mama, I promise. Good. Because the world needs more women who aren't afraid to fight for justice. That night, as Clara packed for her trip to Denver, she reflected on how much had changed. A year ago, she'd been a desperate widow, fleeing in the night with her children. Now she was a respected member of the community, a voice for women's rights, a partner in a loving marriage. She thought about the speech she would give to the Board of Education the next day, about the legislation she would advocate for, about the difference she might make in the lives of children she would never meet. But mostly she thought about the lesson she'd learned through all the pain and struggle, that sometimes the only way to find your strength is to be tested by forces that seem insurmountable, that sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what you're truly capable of. As she climbed into bed beside Zeke, Clara felt grateful for every moment of her journey, even the darkest ones. Because without them, she never would have become the woman she was meant to be. Sweet dreams, Mrs. Dunn, Zeke said, kissing her forehead. Sweet dreams, Mr. Dunn, she replied, settling into his arms. Outside, the wind whispered through the pine trees, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. It was the sound of home, of peace, of a life well lived. Clara closed her eyes and smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference. But tonight, she was exactly where she belonged, surrounded by love, strengthened by purpose, and ready for whatever the future might bring. The scared, broken woman who'd been publicly humiliated in Nebraska was gone. In her place stood Clara Dunn, educator, advocate, mother, wife. A woman who'd learned that true strength comes not from never falling, but from rising every time you do. A woman who discovered that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to give up. The stars wheeled overhead, and Clara slept peacefully, dreaming of the bright future she was helping to build for her daughters, for her community, for all the women who would come after her. She had fought for her children and won. She had fought for justice and prevailed. She had fought for love and found it in the most unexpected place. And in the morning, she would wake up ready to fight again.